Welcome into Yahoo Sports Daily. Happy Monday. I am Caroline Fenton. He is Coley Harvey in for Jason Fitz this morning, and we have an absolutely jam-packed show today. We'll react to the NFL draft. We'll give our draft grades, what we loved, what we didn't. Of course, we'll react to the firing of Alex Cora. Joon Lee joins us to talk all things Major League Baseball and Boston Red Sox. But Coley, there is only one place to start this morning, and that is in the NBA. The Houston Rockets avoid the sweep. The sweep. The Lakers drop Game 4, 115-96. But it wasn't just what we saw on the court that I think is the biggest story. It wasn't the fact that the Rockets were able to find some consistency and some offensive scoring. It wasn't the 12 threes that we saw from Houston last night. No, no, no. It was really what was said off the court. After the game, teammates credited Sengun in his speech where he said that he didn't want to go home. He said that he called this team his team. Amen Thompson said, "I am proud of him for taking a leadership role." Coley, I don't think that any of that is an accident. The fact that Alperen Sengun is taking ownership over this team and maybe could be a shot to who was on in street clothes on the sidelines, and that is Kevin Durant. So what is your reaction to Alperen Sengun and Amen Thompson and their comments that they made over the weekend?
Well, Caroline, it certainly is something that you don't want to hear when you do have KD sitting on the bench, the guy who's supposed to be your star, supposed to be your leader, supposed to be your on-court leader and vocal leader, right? But I actually really like this. And I like this because this is a young guy in Sengun, now 23 years old, soon to be 24, taking on ownership of this team. I know he's been in the league for 5, 6 seasons now, but he finally feels comfortable to step up and take ownership to say, hey, this is my team. I'm not going home, and I'm going to make sure that we as a team don't go home. Granted, the Rockets come into the next game now still down very much in this series. 3-1, of course, is where they're down. So they're going into Game 5 still with their backs against the wall, looking like LA might end up walking out of this series the way that it has all the way to this point. But to that point, you need that kind of inspiration. And to hear some of his teammates like Amen Thompson saying, hey, this motivated us. I was carrying this pregame speech with me during the game. I mean, that's a real positive. And again, with Sengun, this is a guy who just a couple of years ago was still using an interpreter to speak. Of course, he's from Turkey, so he English is not his first language. And so to speak with his teammates, to speak to reporters and the public, he was using an interpreter. But in recent years, he's gotten more and more comfortable with English that he's gotten to the point where, hey, I'm going to speak up even more. I'm going to let my teammates know how I feel. And then he balled out, a 19-point effort last night. He really paved the way in that third quarter for the Rockets to extend their lead. Even drew a foul on from DeAndre Ayton, and that foul led to a tech that led Ayton to being ejected. So it seemed as if he was getting underneath his skin, kind of getting underneath the skin of the Lakers too, to a degree. So Sengun, to me, I'm all for it. I like hearing when players are stepping up in that regard, are saying, I'm going to take ownership of this team and we are not going to lose this game. I love hearing that. I don't know, again, if that's what we want to hear, given the guy who's supposed to be the star of this team, maybe not having an opportunity to step up and say the same and, of course, do the same because he's injured, and that being, of course, Kevin Durant.
Yeah, if you just want to look at the game itself, Houston found some offensive firepower that it felt like they'd been lacking in the first few games. And it felt like the Lakers were tired. It felt like the Lakers were just missing this certain edge and this certain fire that they were playing with in the beginning. I mean, LeBron James last night, 10 points, 8 turnovers, after we had seen 3 consecutive games of LeBron James looking like Superman, being Superman for this Lakers team, carrying this Lakers team. 41-year-old LeBron James looked like 21-year-old LeBron James in the first 3 games. And last night, he really kind of looked every bit of 41. He just looked gassed. But honestly, Coley, I'm not overly concerned about this Lakers team because they've just looked like the better team for a majority of this series. Now, I think Game 5 is going to be incredibly critical. If Houston's able to take Game 5, 3-2 feels wildly different, and all of a sudden we have a much different series, especially if Luka and Austin Reeves can't get back out in the court and give the Lakers this offensive firepower that it felt like they were lacking in Game 4. overall, and not the Lakers' best night. That Friday to Sunday quick turnaround looked like it kind of took a toll on this Lakers team. Unless we see it come to fruition again in Game 5, I'm not overly concerned about the Lakers. But it is crazy on a night where the Lakers did so many good things. You bring up 23 points for Amon Thompson. We had 20 points from Tari Eason, 17 from Reed Shepherd, who's really kind of getting his first experience in the NBA postseason. Houston shot almost 50% from the field. I mentioned the threes, 12 of 30 on the night for Houston, where all of these things finally still felt like they started to click for this team. There's still this gray cloud that's hanging over Houston. And it's because it is becoming more and more obvious that there is dysfunction within that locker room. It just feels so incredibly toxic in Houston. And I'll even go back to in the regular season when Kevin Durant was talking about, well, hey, maybe I shouldn't, be on the court. Maybe I should be on the sidelines because maybe somebody else should step up. There was clear and obvious frustration from KD that that team was being largely carried by him and nobody else was stepping up. I didn't blame him for feeling that way, but I thought that was wild for him to come out and actually say that and really throw not only his teammates, but also his coach and the entire organization. It felt like under the bus. And then in a win last night, the number one story, what felt like the biggest headline from the evening, is what Alperen Sengun is saying, is what Amon Thompson is saying. And we also heard in a report from Dave McMenamin that they weren't talking to KD while he was rehabbing. They didn't know what was going on with Kevin Durant behind the scenes. And I just think that's strange. I just think that shows that there is maybe some factions in the locker room, that there is some friction happening between Kevin Durant and the rest of the team, that everything in Houston just feels incredibly toxic. And I don't want to fast forward to the off season. I don't want to just go ahead and assume that this is the Lakers series to lose because we got a whole lot of basketball ahead of us. But whenever the Rockets do inevitably get eliminated in the postseason, whether it's in this series against the Lakers, which I believe it's going to be, but if the Rockets find themselves winning this series and then falling in the second round, whenever it is, I wouldn't be surprised to see some sweeping changes happening in Houston, Coley.
Yeah, I understand that, and I get it in large part because of what you're saying about Kevin Durant. This is a star that, like you said, maybe at times during the season felt like, hey, I'm shouldering the load, and where's kind of the help, right? And that's kind of why I
Mhm.
point to what Sengun said pregame yesterday, in that hey, now someone is stepping up. Someone is saying, I'm going to take some ownership of where this team goes in an elimination game. And to be clear, from this point forward, the Rockets are in elimination mode. So they're going to need another pregame speech like that, whether it's from him or Amon Thompson or somebody coming up. One thing I'm curious about is what this has done to Kevin Durant's legacy, right? How much
Mhm.
has his legacy changed by the fact that we haven't seen him in this series, really? Of course, injuries are injuries, and that they are what they are. You're able to play, you're able to not play. You're able to play through something, you're able to not play through something. Um, but how much does Kevin Durant change in our eyes, in the sense that there is this level of drama, as you've put it? I know toxicity is the word that you've used. How much does that change what his legacy in the NBA would be to you, Caroline, if that is indeed what's behind the scenes here?
Honestly, Coley, I don't think it changes it or hurts it much. Because didn't we kind of know this about Kevin Durant? Look, Kevin Durant is a future Hall of Famer. Kevin Durant will go down as one of the greatest players in the history of the NBA. Do not get that twisted. Kevin Durant, the player, undeniable, with just his sheer and utter talent and just what he can bring to the game of basketball. But didn't we already know that Kevin Durant had some big time question marks surrounding his level of leadership? Haven't we already seen Kevin Durant not really be able to carry a team far in the playoffs or to a championship? Didn't we already kind of know that Kevin Durant is maybe more of a Robin than he is a Batman? Didn't we already kind of know that Kevin Durant can breed a certain level of toxicity within a locker room? don't we all kind of know this about Kevin Durant? It's not nothing. It's not gonna be not gonna be part of his legacy. But I just don't think that we're seeing anything wildly different from Kevin Durant in Houston that we didn't already see, maybe, for example, in Phoenix. I don't think that we're learning anything new about Kevin Durant that we didn't already know. If we want to talk about legacy, seeing how LeBron James was able to carry the Lakers in their first 3 games at 41 years old. I mean, surely, yes, I acknowledge that LeBron James has achieved much more in the NBA than just carrying a team in 3 games through the first round of a playoff series. I wholeheartedly acknowledge that. But I think we're just, we're adding even more to LeBron James's legacy. I feel like his legacy is being cemented even more than it already was ironcladly cemented. But for Kevin Durant, I don't think, Coley, that we are learning anything new about him.
I think that's the funny part about it is that we've come into this series and we've put these two stars on the same plane, same pedestal. KD, LeBron, who's going to win? Who's going to be better in this series? And the fact that we, of course,
Mhm.
haven't seen KD, and there is this talk about what's been going on in the locker room, what's been happening off the court in that regard. That does affect, to me, how he should be regarded, at least in this postseason, in this playoffs, because on the other side, LeBron has been going off. Of course, an off night for LeBron last night, 10 points, 8 turnovers, as you mentioned. But still, he has been showing up every other game in this series. He has really shouldered the load at 41 years old, putting this team on his back, just as I thought that he would. I kind of came into this series feeling like this was probably the one playoff series that LeBron could afford to put the team on his shoulders, and he's been doing that. Austin Reeves, if he comes back fairly soon, and there is a chance that maybe we see him at some point in this series now that it's going more than 4 games, I think that will help lessen the load on LeBron. But either way, that being said, LeBron has certainly upheld his end of the bargain. Something that I find kind of curious too is we talk about KD possibly not talking to his teammates, not there being a little bit of a disconnect. Just last week we were talking about Juan Soto and the Mets and the fact that the Mets weren't communicating with Juan Soto when he was away from the team. He was rehabbing in New York from an injury while the team was on a road trip that took them to Los Angeles and Chicago. And we made a kind of a big deal about that. That was a big deal all throughout sports and Major League Baseball. This is a totally different scenario in that KD you're in the playoffs and KD is there. He's around his team, and this is a meaningful moment. You would expect that the reports wouldn't be, the team feels like there's a disconnect. We don't know what's happening here with our star. We're not really talking to him. You wouldn't expect to hear that now. April 27th in a major league season, sure, you can hear that at this point, and you're like, okay, this isn't really that big of a deal. This is kind of a big deal, and I think it does lead to what you just said earlier about maybe there's a level of toxicity on one side of the locker room. On the other side of it, though, I'm really pleased to hear that somebody like Sengun has stepped up and said, "Look, I'm taking control of this team, and we're gonna ride this out." And clearly, his teammates who were playing in the game last night were buying into that.
They were buying into it. So as we look forward, as we look ahead in this series, did the Rockets find something? Can the Rockets make this a series, or are the Lakers going to wrap this up in 5, in your opinion?
I think they found something for sure. Excuse me. I think they found something in this series, and it goes to a point that you just made. The Lakers are a little bit beat up right now. They kind of looked last night like a team that was kind of just walking through the motions, taking that long flight from LA to Houston. They're going to have to go back at some point, and of course both teams have to do that, but the Lakers are a little bit longer in the tooth, so to speak, specifically with their key players, their star players, their veteran players. All of that travel, all of that grind that they've been going through for the first 3 games of this series, maybe it did catch up. I wouldn't be surprised if we have a very competitive game 5. But beyond that, I still do think that this series is Los Angeles's to lose, just based on the way the Lakers have played to this stage. And as much as I'm excited about Sengun stepping up and taking ownership and his teammates following him, I don't think that that's going to ultimately be enough to get past the hurdle that's LeBron and the Lakers.
Yeah, maybe they found a little bit of a something, but I think that this series gets wrapped up in 5. I think the Lakers getting some much needed rest, few days. They don't play until Wednesday. They're back in LA on a Wednesday. I think that kind of momentum I think is going to be, palpable for the Lakers. I also think that LeBron James isn't going to have multiple games where he has only 2 fewer turnovers than he had a point total. I think that LeBron James gets back the LeBron James that we saw at the beginning of the series. Exactly. I think the Lakers are able to wrap this one up in 5, and they get some much needed rest. All right, coming up next here, the Giants get an absolute steal with that man right there. We'll give our grades on the NFL draft coming up next year on Yahoo Sports Daily.
Another matchup between the Denver Nuggets and the Minnesota Timberwolves. How are these teams going to guard each other?
If you're Denver, you're going to have to find a comfort throwing different coverages at Minnesota and Anthony Edwards. It can't just be one thing. The same goes for Nikola Jokic, where honestly, whatever you do, I'm eventually going to get to a point where you do not feel comfortable with how you are guarding me, no matter who's on me.
Handoff, Thomas busting it through for the end zone, touchdown! Tavion Thomas and Tucson back in front with 16 seconds left. 1 second, final play of the game. Jerome Johnson looking into the end zone. Johnson, far corner, jump ball, knocked into the crowd. Game over, Tucson wins.
Playing basketball with your back to the basket and not able to see the floor in the same way was a whole lot different for LeBron. And so that's why it took a little bit for him to feel comfortable in that back to the basket positioning. He's got more post-ups this postseason than Jokic, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Alperen Sengun combined. This is a huge story, and what a wrinkle that LeBron James has thrown into this series.
When you guys talk about your relationship and your friendship and your respect, there are some people who think like, well, do they want to kill each other? Do they want to fight each other? Do they want to hurt each other? You have to do that when you fight someone.
Yeah. If you have like females sparring in the gym, like it's really hard to not to go heavy. Like women just like, they cut that, emotional thing off and they just like, it's me or you. And Rhonda has that, I have that.
All right, this is how our very own Charles McDonald graded everything out. But guess what? We are not Charles McDonald. As much as we love C-Mac here on this show, we are prepared to hand out our own grades now that the NFL draft has wrapped up. We have all 3 days of the draft in the books, and the bar is high. We don't just go in the middle area. We don't try and hold things back at all here on Yahoo Sports Daily. No. We're talking only A+. So whether it's a team, whether it's a player, or whatever else that we can grade out from the NFL draft, the biggest winners from the draft period, in our opinion. All right, Coley, start us off with your very first A+ from the NFL draft this past weekend.
Caroline, I have to stay right here in my backyard, New York City, go with the New York Football Giants. Got to give them an A+ because they really did a great job all the way throughout the draft, I thought. Rounds 1 through 7, and it started off right there in round 1, getting 2 picks in the top 10. Arvell Reese, that edge rusher, the fact that he fell all the way to number 5 is it's insane to me. It's mind-boggling, and I'll probably talk about this a few times on today's show, but I still can't believe that he slipped all the way that far down. So absolute steal for the Giants there at number 5, getting Arvell Reese, to me, the top edge rusher in this game, a real savvy guy, athletic guy, rangy guy, hard-hitting guy. It feels like he's going to check off so many boxes for the Giants this season. And then at number 10, getting Francis Mauigoa, a guy who's going to be able to protect for your quarterback in Jackson Dart. So you're going to keep Jackson Dart out of the medical tent as much as possible, possibly this year, and he's going to be a key reason why. So I really obviously like that pick. I thought that really aided this team. And then you keep going on, and you look at Colton Hood, who was available in the second round as the Giants' number round 2 pick. He was a player who had a first round grade as a corner, looked like he was possibly going to go somewhere in the 20s, high 20s there, early 20s. And he slipped all the way down into the second round. So smart for the Giants to get some really good value right there. And then the other one that I really liked was the receiver Malachi Fields going there in round 4. Was that round 4? Round 3 for the Giants as well. So you get another receiver to pair with Malik Neighbors. You get the offensive lineman to protect for the quarterback, and you get the great edge rusher to pass rush to try to get you some turnovers, to get the ball back in the hands of this offense. I thought that was a really smart draft all the way through for the Giants. So they get an A+ for me.
I am so with you on that. I think the Giants, just for the first round alone, get an A+. I mean, there was so much conversation about Arvell Reese being the best player in this draft. So the fact that the Giants can sit back and wait for Arvell Reese to come to them, and they acknowledged it. Look, it's not necessarily a need, but when one of the best, if not the best players in this draft falls to you at 5, you throw need out the window and you say, we're taking that guy. So now all of a sudden the Giants pass rush, which was already terrifying with Brian Burns and Abdul Carter and Kayvon Thibodeau, gets that much more intimidating with Arvell Reese. So I'm totally 100% with you there. I had 2 teams kind of at a tie that both get A+ for specific picks. Not maybe overall for the entirety of the draft, but specific picks that I really, really loved. Need and value. I'll start off with the Browns. They needed offensive line and wide receiver help. That was so clear and so obvious from this past season. I mean, they led the NFL in drops this past season. They needed some protection, especially when they're going into a period of quarterback evaluation, which is exactly what they're doing with Deshaun Watson, Shedeur Sanders, and Dylan Gabriel has to be, considered in that conversation. So what do? They went out, they traded back in the first round, picked up some extra picks, and still ended up with the offensive lineman at 9 that they would have taken anyway at 6 in Spencer Fano, an offensive tackle from Utah, one of the top tackles in this draft. And then they get Casey Concepcion in the back half of the first round. Some people maybe viewed it as a little bit of a reach in the back half of the first round. But I love Casey Concepcion, not only what he can add in terms of speed as a receiver, but also what he adds as special teams. He was hands down the most electric returner in college football this past season at Texas A&M. But then they doubled down. I mean, wide receiver was clearly a desperate need for the Browns. So they're looking at it and saying, not only does Casey Concepcion check that box, but we're going to double down and draft Denzel Boston at the top of the second round. So I think Denzel Boston came into this draft with a first round grade. So the fact that they're able to get him at pick 39, I think is a little bit of value there. My favorite part about it, though, is the fact that Denzel Boston and Casey Concepcion, 2 very different styles of receivers. Denzel Boston is maybe a little bit more of your A.J. Brown type, big bodied, bruising runner, yak kind of guy, where Casey Concepcion is a little bit more kind of elusive, stretch the field guy, super, super speedy. And then they went out and they got Taylon Green in the back of the draft as well. So I thought that was just in terms of value, in terms of not a whole lot of pressure in the 6th round, but a guy who just absolutely wowed people at the combine. I loved. Second team, though, that I'll give an A+ to is the Raiders. Obviously, Fernando Mendoza, you find ideally your quarterback of the future at number 1 overall, that gets an A+. But the pick that really stands out to me is Jermod McCoy. They're able to get Jermod McCoy in the 4th round, a guy that had top 10 grades going into the draft. And he fell significantly because the medicals weren't great. There were some medicals that said that maybe he would have to get surgery again after tearing his ACL in 2024, missing the entirety of the 2025 season. So Jermod McCoy is a big-time medical question mark. But at his best, he can be a Pro Bowl All-Pro receiver. And at absolute worst, Jermod McCoy can't consistently stay on the field. But in the 4th round, I think you're willing to take that kind of risk. So I love that the Raiders looked around and said, you know what? We have a need in the secondary. Jermod McCoy can be a superstar in this league. But if he's not, no harm, no foul. All it was was a 4th-round pick. So I love the Raiders taking Jermon McCoy there in the 4th.
I really liked both of those answers. I like both the Browns and the Raiders. I want to stick with the Browns real quick. Casey's Concepcion is perhaps one of the shiftiest, quickest, most fun receivers that I've had a chance to cover. I covered him when he was at NC State a couple of years ago. And I mean, I was just wowed by the electricity that's within this guy's hands whenever he gets the football in his hands. So that's a key pickup. And the Browns have been looking for help in the return game for the last couple of years. So that's going to be another area where he's really going to help to vault them. For my number 2, if I couldn't pick the Browns, my number 2 pick, I'm actually going with the Eagles right here, specifically for a level of pettiness that I think that they demonstrated there in the first round. Of course, the Eagles selecting Makai Lemon at 20 overall, jumping up over the Steelers in order to get him. Of course, they had the 23rd pick, traded up with the Cowboys to get to 20. And the pettiness comes in because Lemon was on the phone with the Steelers, who were there at 21, and the Steelers, of course, draft is in Pittsburgh. He's in Pittsburgh. It felt like it was about to be a magical moment for the city of Pittsburgh. The Steelers say, hey, we're going to take you at 21 overall. This is going to be great. Everything's la-di-da, fun and happiness. All of a sudden, the pick comes in, the Eagles making that last-minute trade with the Cowboys, and at 20th, one spot ahead, the Eagles end up selecting Makai Lemon. And I mean, it was weird cinema because at the time we didn't know quite what his reaction was. And it was while we were on the show on Friday when the reports started coming out that this is exactly what happened. And so that adds to kind of the confusion that you could see on Lemon's eyes in that moment. So, I'm picking the Eagles largely for the pettiness of that, but also I like what else they did. They went out and got a tight end in Eli Stokes during this draft, who adds some size and beef, so to speak, within that offense. This is a guy who can be a pass catcher, but he also is somebody who's going to aid that tush push, so to speak. Another guy who's going to aid that tush push is Markel Bell. He's someone else that they're going to have as an interior offensive lineman. So I really liked what the Eagles did right there. I like the fact that with Stowers and also Lemon, you've got a little bit of a new look passing game in some ways too. Of course, Devontae Smith as well will be a key weapon in the passing game for Jalen Hurts, who's not going to be there. You mentioned his name earlier, A.J. Brown. It looks like he's out of here now that Makai Lemon is coming in.
And we talked about the Browns, Raiders, Giants, and Eagles. One of those teams is not like the other. So a Super Bowl contender just got that much stronger, I believe, and I think you believe as well, based off of some of the players they were able to land in the draft. So Howie Roseman, that man does it again. I do want to give an honorable mention, an A+ moment from the draft, and that is the moment that Eli Heidenreich, the running back from Navy, was drafted to Pittsburgh. So Eli Heidenreich was a running back, wide receiver kind of combo player out of Navy. He's the leading receiver in Navy history, will go down, I believe, as one of the greatest players to ever wear a Navy uniform in the Navy football program. Eli Heidenreich is from Pittsburgh. He grew up a Pittsburgh Steeler fan, and he got drafted as he leaves his college career as the leading receiver at his university, got drafted in his hometown by his hometown team, wearing his Navy uniform. It was just such a special moment. He got drafted, puts on his Steelers hat. He's walking down the tunnel. He touches the Pittsburgh Steelers logo. You can tell he's incredibly emotional. So, I mean, this is a guy who really kind of changed Navy football. A triple option offense that evolved so much because of what he was able to bring to that offense. An explosive runner, obviously an explosive pass catcher as well. So I love to see that moment. It was a feel-good moment. As the draft is full of so many feel-good moments, that was absolutely a feel-good one there as well. Don't know how many feel-good moments are going on in Boston, though. Alex Cora, manager of the Red Sox, gets ousted over the weekend. Joon Lee joins the show to break it all down.
Kick is on the way. And Dante Wright will bring it out of the end zone. Right across the 5, the 10, the 15. Right across the 20. Into New Mexico territory. 15, 10, 5. Does he get in?
He did.
Touchdown,
He did.
Pirates!
Dante Wright goes back. He played like a center fielder at Yankee Stadium and then takes it the length of the building. The young man was electric on that kick return.
Do you not enjoy this?
No,
Would you rather not do it?
that's not in the cards.
Why not?
It's not an option. I've worked so hard for so long. I've built myself up to a position and I've dug myself into a hole.
But I feel like you've reached a point in your life where, correct me if I'm wrong, you could do other things.
What am I going to do? There's nothing like a fight night check. That's the beauty of fighting.
NFL teams tanking this season are making a huge mistake. Why, good sir?
Okay. This show has nefarious producers who fashion my idle comments over text into hot takes. And frankly, I'm fine with that, to be honest. Let's talk about Manning for a second. Someone who has not yet reached his potential by any measure. There will never be a player, in my opinion, that is a surefire lock that is worth burning an entire NFL season for.
Edwards has got it. Throw, tip, intercepted. Destin Mack, the INT. And he makes the biggest play of the game defensively for Orlando.
Great coverage on the back end by the Orlando Pirates. 4th down and 4. Destin Mack in coverage. Big time hit by Kyrie Coleman leads to the interception.
Players weren't given a voice on Alex Cora's firing, and now they're pushing back publicly. Inside the Red Sox, some described that dynamic to me as, quote, toxic positivity, ignoring reality while projecting stability. That there from Joon Lee. JoonLee.substack.com is where you can find and should check out Joon's work. His YouTube channel, too. He does such a fantastic job talking all things Major League Baseball. Joon Lee now joins us here. Appreciate you for being here to help us make sense of the big news out of Boston this past weekend. The timing of Alex Cora's firing, along with several staff members as well. After such a big win at that, help us make sense of this, Joon. Why now?
Yeah, it smells of desperation because the Red Sox are in a position where Craig Breslow is going into his third full. He's going into a year where he's had kind of his fingerprints all over this team, and between Dave Dombrowski in the past and Chaim Bloom, they haven't made it past year 4, and that's where Craig Breslow is. And the hot seat is hot right now in Boston between, obviously, Alex Cora is gone now, but Craig Breslow is now in a position where he's been selling this next phase of the organization as Roman Anthony coming up, Marcelo Meyer coming up, Christian Campbell coming up. Those young guys have come up, and the results on the team have arguably gotten worse this season. They don't look like a team that made the playoffs last year. Their offense is among the worst in all of Major League Baseball. Their pitching has been inconsistent. And while their defense has gone marginally better over the course of this year, this is not a team that has shown signs of improvement. And we've seen in the past in Boston with John Henry that this is a guy, as owner, who is very willing to change his opinions on what's going on very quickly, and as a result is willing to make decisions very quickly. But the Red Sox have been in a point where they're starting to lose credibility with the fan base, that they've been selling this plan for years, that they're going to start spending money when these young guys come up. And the Red Sox ranked 12th in all of Major League Baseball in payroll, which is a far cry from where the team was when they were winning championships in 2004, 2007, 2013, and 2018. Those teams were often top 5, even top 3 in payroll in all of Major League Baseball. So the Red Sox are not operating in the way that they used to, and they're trying to sell fans on the idea that they're still the team that they used to be.
Yeah, Joon, we definitely want to ask you a little bit about the fans in a second, but I want to go back to that tweet that you had for a second. At the end of that tweet, you mentioned Sam Kennedy and how he basically owned up to leading with, quote, toxic positivity. He said, hey, I'm guilty as charged in that respect. So what's the sense that you're getting that the decision makers there with the Red Sox, that they made this decision to fire Alex Cora and his staff with full confidence? What's the sense that you're getting that that was the case?
Well, it was really interesting yesterday during the press conference that Breslow and Kennedy had in Baltimore, that Kennedy basically put all of the onus on firing Cora on Breslow. And I think it kind of speaks to how tenuous the situation is, and kind of the balancing act that Craig Breslow has to do, where now the results of this team are all on him. And it's a really weird position for Breslow to be in, because it's not very often that you see your boss going out in public being like, this decision, it's all on this guy, it's not on me. And so there's already this sort of isolation happening around Craig Breslow. And so it kind of speaks to how just fragile the whole situation is around Craig Breslow's job security. And I think it generally speaks to just the culture that the team has built around from the front office down over the course of the last, I would say, 7 to 10 years.
I mean, Joon, we're talking about the Red Sox. Historically, one of the best run organizations in baseball. I mean, one of the biggest brands in baseball. The Boston Red Sox. How did we get here to this point to where the Boston Red Sox are being operated this way?
Well, I think it's exactly that. They're a historic brand. They are a brand that people recognize. And in Boston, the city revolves around the Red Sox in a way that I think is really unique. Is really only seen, I think, in a city called like Philadelphia. Like, I live in New York now. Baseball's between two teams. It's a bigger city. There's more things to do. Boston is a smaller city where sports is really the thing that the entire city revolves around. And as a result, people go to Red Sox games regardless of whether or not the team is good. So the Red Sox are in a position where they can maximize the amount of profit that they're making on a year-to-year basis by putting out a team that's currently 12th in payroll, by not spending a ton on players, but being good enough where they might be able to sniff the playoffs. So they give fans hope. And if you give fans enough hope, they're going to be showing up to the games. I mean, during this last Red Sox-Yankees series, there was a lot more Yankee fans there. I mean, Fenway has become a tourist attraction where fans from all over baseball come into Boston to watch a game at Fenway Park. And as a result, the Red Sox have this almost guaranteed pipeline of ticket revenue and sales because Fenway Park is such an attraction. And so it's exactly that, Caroline, that the Red Sox are a brand, that Fenway Park is a brand, that they're in a position where, because of the influence of private equity in the ownership group since 2019, they're trying to much more maximize profits now in the way that they operate versus actually putting out a good team. They're trying to do both at the same time, but currently the emphasis is much more on maximizing the profits that the team makes on a year-to-year basis.
When it comes to making decisions based on the team, there's a quote that was circulating over the weekend from Red Sox writer Rob Bradford. He posted this, and this was something that he got from an unnamed player who basically said that the firing of Alex Cora is like basically doing number 2 in your pants and changing your shirt. He didn't quite use that language. He used a little bit of a different word there. We understand what he was getting at. We've already heard from a number of players like Trevor Story, who basically questioned the fairness of letting go of Cora at this point. How close do you think we are to star players like Story wanting out?
I mean, we're already kind of in a place where there's this uprising against the front office. And I think it speaks to this deeper credibility crisis that this front office has, that this ownership group has, where they have been selling not just the fan base, but the players on winning a World Series. And I think the thing that makes Alex Cora's firing so interesting here is that he is a manager who has that World Series pedigree, that has the reputation of wanting to win at almost all costs. I mean, we saw this when he was involved in the Houston Astros sign stealing scandal with the trash cans. He's a guy who prioritizes winning above everything. And we've seen that throughout the course of his career. And when you're a player, especially a guy like Trevor Story, who signed in Boston to try to win a World Series, and the manager who almost symbolizes going for it, the manager who symbolizes, the team wanting to compete at the highest level, is then ousted and replaced with, Chad Tracy, the minor league AAA manager for the Worcester Red Sox, has a great reputation and has managed a lot of the young guys here in the past. But that's a different type of manager, and it kind of speaks to the type of intent that the team has moving forward. And so I can understand why someone like Trevor Story is so frustrated, even though, to be frank, his lack of performance this year is part of why Cora is no longer with the team. But Cora, in many ways, symbolizes the Red Sox being willing and able to go for it at an aggressive level.
Look, Joon, I know it is April 27th. I know we have a lot of baseball ahead of us. I wholeheartedly acknowledge that. But right now, as of April 27th, the Red Sox are 7 games out of first place in the division. Is it fair to say, of all of these teams that have been disappointing to start the season, whether it be the Mets or the Phillies, is it fair to say the Boston Red Sox are the biggest disappointment in Major League Baseball?
Ooh. I think the Mets are still the biggest disappointment, but I think the Mets have a higher ceiling than the Red Sox do. They just have more star players. They have Francisco Lindor and they have Juan Soto. The Red Sox don't have that. They don't have a power bat that's going to be able to drive the offense to kind of expand to another level in the way that Alex Bregman did in the past, that Rafael Devers did in the past. And so the Mets have been more disappointing, but they also have the tools to be able to make some sort of comeback. The Red Sox roster is much more fundamentally flawed in a way that the Mets roster isn't. And the Red Sox are in this really weird position where they need Roman Anthony to become a superstar. They need guys like Marcelo Meyer, one of their other top young prospects, to become a star immediately. It's a lot of pressure on a lot of the young guys. And I think it kind of speaks to just the way that the Red Sox were handling the press around this yesterday. The first person to address cameras yesterday was 22-year-old Roman Anthony. He's considered the leader of this team, and it's like an absurd thing because he's never even played a full season in Major League Baseball. This is a group that has been assembled together that is so reliant on the prospects becoming the superstars immediately that there's not really leadership in the clubhouse in the way that it has been in the past.
That reminds me of years ago when Bobby Bowden stepped down at Florida State. The first people that were allowed to speak because the leadership didn't want to speak was the players. And that's laughable. That's really laughable in that situation. What do you believe is next for Alex Cora, Joon?
I mean, there's a whole variety of things. I mean, he could easily take a break. He's been working nonstop for many years now. I also think that there's a decent chance that if the Phillies job, for example, becomes open, that's the perfect gig for him. He's got that relationship with Dave Dombrowski. They have that relationship tying back to the 2018 Red Sox, when the Red Sox were last kind of operating like a big market team. And so I think that he's in a spot where around baseball, he's considered one of the best postseason managers in all of the game. He has a reputation for taking talented rosters that are going for it over the top. And I think that if one of these prime jobs opens up, he's going to be the prime candidate for it because he's got that experience and reputation that is able to kind of take teams to that next level.
Joon, you also grew up in. Nope, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Caroline.
No, go ahead, Coley. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, Joon, I know you grew up in Boston, you know the city very well, and we've kind of talked a little bit about the fan bases there, but considering how passionate sports fans are as a whole in Boston, the Pats obviously just going to the Super Bowl, the Bruins are in the playoffs, the Celtics are doing what they're doing in the playoffs. To give us the energy of the entire city when it comes to Red Sox fans at this point and how they're feeling compared to all of that.
The Bruins are in the playoffs, the Celtics are in the playoffs, and right now, somehow, in April, the Red Sox are the number one story in the city. I think that kind of says it all. Like, there's two playoff teams, and the Red Sox firing situation, the disappointment of the team so far is leading all the sports radio shows this morning.
Which is wild to hear, especially with how much success other Boston teams are having. Coley asked you what's next for Alex Cora. What's next for the Red Sox? Do you expect this to be the spark plug that maybe the team needed? And if not, could we see more sweeping changes in Red Sox leadership?
I mean, I think that this Red Sox roster has been underperforming compared to the amount of talent that's on the roster. At the same time, you look at the talent level and just the state of the league right now, it's hard to imagine them winning the division at this point. It's hard to, I mean, I think best case scenario, they're competing for a wild card slot if they're able to turn basically everything around, and from this point on, everything goes right. But it does feel like this was a very reactive decision, and it's going to be interesting if the Red Sox aren't in a position heading into the trade deadline, if the ownership group is going to allow Craig Breslow, as someone who's going to be desperate to keep his job, to be managing the team heading into the trade deadline. And so that's the thing to watch out for, is if the Red Sox are out of contention, is Craig Breslow still going to have his job by the end of July?
JoonLee.substack.com is where you can find his work. Highly recommended if you haven't checked it out. He will make you a smarter sports fan. You'll be able to talk at the water cooler with all of your coworkers and sound like the smartest person in the room because of Joon Lee's breakdown of all things sports and all things sports business. So Joon, thank you so much for your time this morning. Appreciate you as always, my friend. We'll catch up soon.
Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. JoonLee.substack.com is where you can find him, and you can find her on national TV every single game next season. Is that good for the W? We'll discuss coming up next.
Does Orlando win it in overtime, or does this instant classic continue? Deep drop and throw, end zone, Thomas Owens. That's an Orlando overtime winner. That is the most decorated receiver in the history of the franchise. Of course, he's the one to end it.
He's like 6'5", 230, like insane athlete, really, really good arm. And I don't know if he'll ever be the fourth best quarterback in the league where he's like Josh Allen, kind of like always in, MVP conversations, but he can be in the Matt Ryan, Dak Prescott tier where he's like kind of always quarterback 7-ish and like can have those years and moments where he's playing like an all-pro. Like that to me is the best outcome.
What put you over the top to like, I want to go to Indiana?
I was really close to going to a couple other schools. However, the point that really cemented me into Indiana is Coach Signetti really focusing on development. His big selling point was, hey, I don't know, like other schools are trying to sell you on if we're going to win a national championship, if we're going to win all these games. I just know one thing I can do is develop quarterbacks.
It's all about alignment and assignment, whether you're playing junior high football or IFL football. Myler fakes the give, goes the other way with it. He launches himself into the end zone, and he's going to get the touchdown.
That's just a dynamic effort. That is a will to want to get it in the end zone there, because he knew that he was running out of space.
Yes.
And so he thought, there's only one way you can go here, and that's up and over.
You see here a team-by-team breakdown and how many nationally televised games each team has in the WNBA next season. The Fever, you see it there, 44 nationally televised games. For those keeping track at home, that is every single game. Literally every single one of the Indiana Fever regular season games is going to be on national TV. So, Coley, I will ask you, is it a bad thing that the W is putting as many Fever games on national TV as they are? Is it a bad thing that the W almost needs Caitlin Clark in this Indiana Fever team? Or is it a good thing that so many people get to watch this superstar on national TV?
Caroline, I'm not sure if that's quite the question to ask right now. I think the real question is, does it make sense at this stage, 3 years into the Caitlin Clark experience in the WNBA, that we're still talking about her as being the box office draw? And, I ask that because, as we always say, there's more than just the Caitlin Clark experience to this league. There's so many other stars whose stories need to be shared and shown. I will say, though, what I would like to think when I see that number, that all 44 of their regular season games are going to be on national television. When I see that, I would like to myopically think that it's because the league says, oh, fans tuning in. Yeah, maybe you're tuning in to watch Caitlin, but hey, you're also going to see Aaliyah Boston play. Raven Johnson is also a rookie star for the Fever. You're tuning in to see just exactly how she fits in. And by the way, judging from her 6 points and 8 rebounds, 8 assists, 6 points, 8 assists, and 2 blocks in her preseason debut for the Fever against the Liberty earlier this weekend, I would say that Raven Johnson is going to fit in just well. All of this just leads me to say we've got more than just the Caitlin Clark experience that the WNBA should be proud of. I know that the Wings were number 2 there, 36 games for them, but the team that I'm really surprised by, seeing how low that they were on that list, are the Aces with 33 games. And the reason I'm so surprised is because, to me, the star, the real box office treat and hit in the WNBA right now is Asia Wilson. And to see that her team is quite that far away from where the Fever rank is a little bit surprising to me. We're talking about a player who is a 7-time All-Star. You know, she's won 4 MVPs. She's won 3 WNBA titles. She just signed the biggest, most lucrative WNBA contract in league history. And yet her team isn't going to be viewed nationally on the national stage as much as Caitlin Clark's. Is a little bit strange to me, but also she plays in Vegas. Maybe some of it also is the fact that being on the West Coast is affecting that more prime viewing window. I don't know. All to say, I will say that this is a good thing. It is a good thing that the league is being marketed in the ways that we are seeing the stars, as often as we are. But again, I just really would like to see a little bit more parity, that maybe that 44 comes closer to 38 and Asia Wilson's 33 comes closer to 36. I don't know. I would just like to see a little bit more of a parity in that regard. But at the end of the day, eyeballs on the league it's a good thing. It's like any news is good news, whether it's good or bad. In that sense, all eyeballs are great eyeballs.
You hit the nail on the head. It is a good thing. It is a good thing. I think there are 2 things that really grow leagues in their infancy, which is exactly where the WNBA is. I mean, this is the 30th season of the W. Compare that to the NBA or the NFL. The WNBA is just a baby. So I think there's 2 things that really grow leagues. It's 1, having a superstar that people can really resonate with. And 2, it's being able to get eyeballs on your product and not being behind a paywall, being able to just sit down on your couch, turn your TV on, and you have access to games. Well, this is checking both of those boxes because Caitlin Clark is a certified superstar that I think nationally and even globally people can resonate with, and it's easily accessible to watch this superstar. So I think overall those 2 reasons why it's a good thing. I think also what Caitlin Clark represents. She's already done in a certain sense, and I think can do even more, is doing kind of exactly what you're mentioning. She's breaking down a barrier to entry into the league that can introduce you to these other superstars. I mean, Caitlin Clark wasn't even the best player on her team last year. Caitlin Clark was injured for majority of the season last year. Kelsey Mitchell was an MVP finalist. Kelsey Mitchell was the reason why the Indiana Fever found themselves in the WNBA semifinals. Like, Caitlin Clark was not the biggest star on her team last year, but she's a household name. She's a name that people recognize. I mean, you can just say Caitlin and everybody knows who you're talking about. That means you are a certified superstar. So if you are an average sports fan sitting at home and you say, oh, Caitlin Clark is playing the Dallas Wings on the Saturday of the beginning of the season, day 2 of the season. So you're talking about Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark playing AZ Fudd and Paige Beckers, the last 4 first overall picks in the WNBA. Like, you might tune in for Caitlin, but stay for Aaliyah Boston. You might tune in for Caitlin, but stay for Brianna Stewart and Sabrina Ionescu. So yes, it's year 3 of the Caitlin Clark experience, and she can still break down some of those barriers to entry that she has, I think, grown popularity to some of these other teams in the league. I mean, Sophie Cunningham, I think, is a household name at this point. Sophie Cunningham, 365 days ago, I think was just that one player in Phoenix that maybe you know, maybe you don't, maybe you recognize her from social media. But no, now Sophie Cunningham, she's a brand. She's a superstar. She's got 1 million followers on TikTok. So to go back to the initial question, I think this is a great thing for the league because people come for Caitlin. I was talking to a Dallas Wings reporter on Hoops 360. Check it out on YouTube. She did an absolutely fantastic job breaking down the Dallas Wings offseason. But she mentioned how the Wings are hosting the Fever in American Airlines Center where the Mavs play because they opened it up to the larger arena in town because Caitlin Clark is coming to town and people are going to buy tickets and people are going to come for Caitlin. They weren't able to pack out American Airlines Center last year because Caitlin Clark was hurt and people didn't want to come if Caitlin Clark wasn't playing. So I'm with you, Coley, wholeheartedly that I want there to be more coverage of the Satu Sableys of the world, of this super team that the New York Liberty are constructing. Asia Wilson, that if the WNBA was dissolved today, Asia Wilson would be on the Mount Rushmore of WNBA players. Of all of these other players, what they're building in Atlanta, all of these other great stories of the W, I want those to be bigger stories in the grand scheme of sports. But the fact of the matter is, right now, they're not. But if Caitlin Clark is the draw that gets people in and makes those stories bigger stories, not just WNBA stories, but sports stories, then so be it. She is growing the game, and you cannot deny that. So if that means that you can grow the game by putting her on national TV every single night, I'll sign up for it.
Yeah, she's certainly growing the sport in that regard. But I just wonder, kind of to your question that you said, the hypothetical. What if, the WNBA blows up all of a sudden, and that's the league, and then hey, we bring it back. This is the end of the Caitlin Clark experience. So what happens now? Who are the stars that we have to point to now? Say Caitlin Clark, God forbid something happens next year and she's not able to play again. Like she goes through some of the same injury issues that she had last year. She's not able to play in very many of these games. So what now? Where do you turn? And I think that's why it's important for the league to not just base its broadcast rights on the face of one star. Base it on all of these women who you just mentioned. Base it on all of these teams you just mentioned. You just mentioned the Dream. And what's really interesting, you mentioned that, the Wings playing the Fever in last year's game that didn't get sold out at American Airlines Center because of the injury to Caitlin Clark. I was actually supposed to cover that game for my previous employer, but we had to pull the plug at the last minute because we realized, well, there's just no interest in the storyline now. And it's really unfortunate that was the way that was viewed. I think that I think again that this league is just so vitally important. That, you talk about 30 years. 30 years is a short amount of time compared to some of the other pro leagues, but it's also a long time. And it's a long time in the sense that we haven't been devoting the same resources to this league and its broadcasting until now. And we're focusing on one person. If that person's not part of the league tomorrow, where does the league go? Where does the league grow? And I think that's why you have to use these opportunities now to really highlight more of these other stars. But again, at the end of the day, we're both in agreement. The more eyeballs that you have on the sport, the better. And there is no denying the fact that Caitlin Clark is bringing the eyeballs in simply because she has the name recognition and she has the ability to. I mean, I'm kind of glossing over the other part of this. She's still a really good player. I think the point is I want to see her on the floor as much as possible, but I also want to see stars like A'ja Wilson on the floor getting the shine as much as they can as well.
In a season in which Caitlin Clark only played 13 of 44 games, the WNBA set records for viewership. The WNBA averaged 1.3 million viewers per game. That's a 6% increase from 2024. Incrementally, the WNBA is getting more eyeballs, even in a series where the biggest draw of the league, I think it's fair to say, in Caitlin Clark, was on the sideline more than she was on the hardwood. So I hear you. What happens if Caitlin Clark... Exactly. What happens if Caitlin Clark, when Caitlin Clark isn't in the league anymore? Well, she is. The WNBA does have Caitlin Clark. So I think as a business tool to be able to grow the game more and more, it would be unwise and not very smart of the WNBA to not put Caitlin Clark on national TV. But that also means that we get other teams on TV. When the Fever plays, they have to play somebody. So that at least opens the door for viewership for some of those other teams as well. So much more to break down on the W side of things. Tune in to Hoops 360 for all things W, all things women's basketball. But we'll transition to men's basketball. Tom Haberstroh joins the show. We'll talk that man. We'll talk all things NBA playoffs coming up next.
Another matchup between the Denver Nuggets and the Minnesota Timberwolves. How are these teams going to guard each other?
If you're Denver, you're going to have to find a comfort throwing different coverages at Minnesota and Anthony Edwards. It can't just be one thing. The same goes for Nikola Jokic, where honestly, whatever you do, I'm eventually going to get to a point where you do not feel comfortable with how you are guarding me, no matter who's on me.
Handoff, Thomas busting it through for the end zone. Touchdown! Tavion Thomas and Tucson back in front with 16 seconds left. 1 second, final play of the game. Jerome Johnson looking to the end zone. Johnson far corner, jump ball, knocked into the crowd. Game over. Tucson wins.
Playing basketball with your back to the basket and not able to see the floor in the same way was a whole lot different for LeBron. And so that's why it took a little bit for him to feel comfortable in that back to the basket positioning. He's got more post-ups this postseason than Jokic, Karl Anthony Towns, and Alperen Sengun combined. This is a huge story, and what a wrinkle that LeBron James has thrown into this series.
When you guys talk about your relationship and your friendship and your respect, there are some people who think like, well, do they want to kill each other? Do they want to fight each other? Do they want to hurt each other? You have to do that when you fight someone.
Yeah. If you have like females sparring in the gym, like it's really hard to not to go heavy. Like women just like, they cut that, you know, emotional thing off and they just like, it's me or you. And Rhonda has that, I have that.
Wemby was not happy with the NBA's concussion protocols, but one thing about Wemby is he's going to keep the main thing, and he is all business. So don't ask him about how the NBA handles concussion protocol now. He'll talk about it at the end of the season, but now we will talk about it as we welcome in friend of the show, Tom Haberstroh. So, Tom, what was the bigger story to you? Was it Wemby being cleared from concussion protocol to be able to play in Game 4, or was it the Spurs' unbelievable second half surge?
Well, to me, Caroline, it's the concussion story. I mean, we're talking about a guy who suffered that concussion in Game 2 on Tuesday and returned in time for Sunday's action. And I talked to Chris Nowinski, who's the founder and CEO of the Concussion and CTE Foundation, a former Harvard football player, also WWE wrestler, who's a neuroscientist, who's one of the leading names in this space from a medical standpoint. And he pointed out that the NBA's 48-hour rule that they have in place after a concussion, it isn't necessarily backed by the neuroscience. Like there isn't anything magical that happens 49 hours after a concussion versus 47 hours. And he reminded me, hey, this is more, that 48-hour window is more about the NBA's schedule, the game schedule, compared to like football. They don't have this 48-hour protocol. And so I put it to you guys, like if a player in the NFL suffered a concussion on Monday Night Football, would he have been cleared in time for Saturday on let's say a potential Saturday football game? We would say, man, that would be pretty close. Well, that is what Wemby essentially did, was a Tuesday concussion, brain injury, and then was cleared in time for Sunday. And so what you're seeing is Victor Wembanyama is not happy with the protocols, or at least how it went down the process. But if you take a step back here and think about an NBA player suffered a brain injury on Tuesday and was ready to play on Sunday, that still is a very close window. And I will also point out, when we talk about brain injuries and returning from a concussion, there are studies that have shown that even after you return from a concussion, you're fully cleared, so to speak, from the NBA, there is a study out that showed that you have a 5 times greater odds of suffering a lower leg musculoskeletal injury after returning from a concussion in the NBA. There was a long study that showed even if you're back from a concussion, that spatial awareness and the other secondary downstream injuries that could result from that are still a great risk. 5 times greater odds of that happening after suffering a concussion compared to players that did not suffer a concussion. So Victor Wembanyama getting clear for Game 4 instead of Game 3, while that seems like a delay and not happy for Victor Wembanyama in his case, I think in the grand scheme of things, there's still more to this injury that I think it was right for the NBA to delay and make sure that he passed all the protocols and the steps to return to play for that Sunday game. It's sensational. I don't want to take away from that outrageously productive game, and he turned the game around. But I will say, we shouldn't say like, hey, he's out of the woods yet. There are still things that we should keep watching with Wemby.
Man, Tom, thanks so much for that perspective, because, yeah, you're right. Anytime you hear head injury, you don't expect to see the player really back in a couple of days, let alone 6 days later, and then to be that productive. But we certainly will keep an eye on him as we move forward. Something that Wemby did say post game, not having to do with his concussion, that still caught attention, was him talking about his teammates. And he said, quote, "We've got this connection. There's no useless drama between us. There's no jealousy. Nobody cares about the stat line. It's our greatest strength." And I ask this because with OKC dealing with Jalen Williams' hamstring injury right now, where would you say the Spurs are in the West? Would you say that they're ahead of OKC, or are they still kind of in that number 2 range?
Well, if they get this kind of Wemby, yeah, I think they're a notch above the Oklahoma City Thunder without Jalen Williams. And again, with a grade 1 hamstring tear, a strain, what we're looking at is possibly in a second round matchup or in the conference finals, we will see Jalen Williams at full strength. But right now, as things stand with Wemby back and a couple assists and a steal away from being in the 5x5 club, at least 5 counting stats in 5 different categories. He was outrageous in that game. And when he was on the floor in the second half, the Blazers shot just like 29% from the floor when he was on the floor in the second half, just completely eviscerating anything that the Blazers wanted to do inside the paint. He tallied 5 blocks in the second half alone. And this guy, he changes everything. It's the reason why before the playoffs started, I picked the Spurs to win it all, is because we've never seen anyone like Wemby. You see the stat here, first player with 25 plus, 10 plus rebounds, and 7 plus blocks in a playoff game since 2004 when Shaq did it. The guy's 22 years old, and he did all of that in just 34 minutes of action. And so you'd imagine he would be part of that 5x5 club if he played 5-10 more minutes in that game. So statistically and the on-court, off-court impact metrics, Victor Wembanyama is as impactful as any player in the NBA. So with Oklahoma City just dominating that matchup against the Phoenix Suns, it seems odd to say that another team might be better, but with Dylan Harper, Stephon Castle, De'Aaron Fox, and Victor Wembanyama playing as well as they are, Vassell and Keldon Johnson as well, this OKC team has some serious competition in the West. And if Wemby continues to play that well, I'm putting them on par, if not a slight edge, with Jalen Williams out.
Wemby made an earlier than anticipated return, but so did Joel Embiid, and it did not matter. The Celtics blew the Sixers out 128-96. What do you make of this notion, this kind of thought that is circulating around social media that the Sixers are better off without Joel Embiid?
Look, I don't care if it's prime Wilt Chamberlain. It's not going to matter if the other team is going to make 24 3-pointers in that game. When we're talking about the Celtics and the way that they've been shooting lights out in the wins, we really haven't seen an NBA team win that 3-point column quite like this. It doesn't matter if Embiid was on the floor or not. This Celtics team, when they get hot like that with Peyton Pritchard, Tatum, and the rest of the team shooting lights out from downtown, it doesn't matter who's on the other side. So Embiid, in a 1-game sample size where they got out-rebounded and the Celtics had the 24-9 edge in the 3-point column, I think it's an easy storyline to say that Joel Embiid makes the Sixers worse right now. But the fact of the matter is VJ Edgecombe in his first rookie playoff debut, he's 0 for 16 on threes outside of game 2 when he went off for 30 points. And then if you add in Kelly Oubre, who's 1 for 11 in those losses from downtown, combined, they are 1 for 27 on threes. So that's the Sixers' problem right now, is they can't shoot. And so when you got a team that is, lights out downtown versus a team that can't shoot, you're going to see margins like you did on Sunday. So I don't think that's an Embiid thing. I think that's just the way that the Celtics have armed up with this amazing fleet of 3-point shooters, and the Sixers just don't have that kind of punch. And a stat on this is that no team has ever had a larger advantage in the made 3-point column over the course of the first 4 games of a first-round series than what we're seeing with the Boston Celtics over the 76ers. They've made more 3-pointers against the Sixers than any team has done in the first 4 games of a playoff series in that first round. So this Celtics team is doing something pretty much unprecedented, and I don't think it has much to do with Joel Embiid.
Well, with Embiid being back and now Wemby's back, one guy who's not back in this playoffs is Anthony Edwards, and it looks like he's going to be out for a long time, for at least weeks, which seems, kind of on the low end when you look at that replay of his injury the other night coming down on his left leg. With Anthony Edwards out and Dante DiVincenzo now out for the rest of the year with that Achilles injury. Can the Wolves actually advance? Can they get out of this series? Can they go even further than the next round in this series?
Yeah, if Ayo Dosunmu, everyone listening at home, Ayo Dosunmu had 43 points in that game. The performance was outstanding, and a big reason why they pulled out that victory without Dante DiVincenzo and Anthony Edwards. Now, a quick note about Anthony Edwards' hyperextension and the bone bruise. Hyperextension is just a description of the injury. It is not a diagnosis, and plenty of players have hyperextended their knee and come back in time for a deep postseason run. Remember, Giannis Antetokounmpo missed only a week when we all watched that knee injury in the 2021 playoffs and thought his season's over and potentially wrecked his entire knee. He was back in a week and scored 50 points in the NBA Finals and won a championship with the Milwaukee Bucks after having a similar, not exactly similar, injury. A hyperextension bone bruise is what Anthony Edwards has. And Paul George last season, he missed about 10 days with a same injury, a bone bruise as a result of a hyperextension. Now, on the other side of that, we saw Nikola Jokic miss a month with this injury earlier this season with a hyperextension that looked a lot worse than it actually was. And so hopefully for Anthony Edwards, it's closer to that Giannis Antetokounmpo and Paul George timeline of about a week to 10 days. But there is potential that this could last longer, as we saw with the three-time MVP Nikola Jokic. Now, let's not understate the impact here. When we're talking about Anthony Edwards, an MVP candidate, and Dante DiVincenzo, it's two starters that they're out. But Ayo Dosunmu, this isn't just a one-game sample size. Over the last few weeks, that guy that they got from the Chicago Bulls for about 4 second-round picks, this is a heist for the Minnesota Timberwolves. The fact that they got a guy who has been playing this well as of late, stepping up for Anthony Edwards, an outstanding addition to the squad, and a guy that I kid you not has scored more in a playoff game than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or Tim Duncan has in their entire careers. So Dosunmu, outstanding performance. They're going to need a lot more of that if they want to pull off this upset against the Denver Nuggets.
No doubt about that. I want to take it over to Cavs-Raptors. I mean, Cavs took a 2-0 series lead, and then they come home with the series tied 2-2. And it does kind of seem like when things get tough and physical for Cleveland, they really just kind of melt down, much like they did last year against the Indiana Pacers. So what does that say about the Cleveland Cavaliers? Or in your opinion, does it say more about the Raptors, and we're just not giving the Raptors enough credit?
Yeah, the star players for the Cleveland Cavaliers need to step up, especially Evan Mobley, who looks like a role player out there in this series. I still can't believe he has as many Defensive Player of the Year awards as Victor Wembanyama. Last year, of course, Evan Mobley was named the Defensive Player of the Year, partly because Wemby didn't meet the criteria for the 65-game rule. But he has been playing soft in this series, and a guy that his usage rate in the postseason for his career is around 18%, which suggests a role player rather than a star player. And in this series, he's been overpowered and playing a lot of fadeaway drives into the paint, getting blocked, getting the ball stolen from him. Any type of physicality that you're seeing with Evan Mobley over the last couple of years in the playoffs, he's wilted. And I think what you're seeing is, yes, James Harden needs to take better care of the ball. They need better shot making. But Evan Mobley is a guy that has a star name and a star reputation. But inside the league and statistically, this guy needs to do a whole lot more if he wants to prove himself to be much more than a regular season performer. So when you look at the numbers, all of his performance metrics, this guy, Evan Mobley, needs to do a lot better against this Toronto Raptors front line than he's been showing. And certainly James Harden needs to play better. Everyone on the Cavs needs to play better. But that guy, Evan Mobley, right now, he's looking like just a role player rather than a star player.
Oh, quickly before we get you out of here, Tom.
Yeah.
Sorry, just quickly before we get you out of here, Tom, who wins this series?
I think the Cavs pull this out, but I'm worried. They have been playoff underperformers the last 3 years, and you wonder if they get a first round out, whether this is a complete blow up or just a tweak in the offseason with the highest payroll in the NBA. I can probably guess which of those two answers ends up happening if the Raptors pull this off.
Tom, we could talk to you all day long. 15 minutes is never enough. So if you want more Tom, who doesn't, check him out on the Big Number Podcast. You can also find him at tomthefinder.com. Tom Haberstroh, appreciate you as always, my friend. We'll catch up with you soon.
You got it, guys.
All right, Tom Haberstroh, he is the absolute best, but some drafts weren't the absolute best. Who failed the NFL draft, in our opinion, coming up next.
Kick is on the way. And Dante Wright will bring it out of the end zone. Right across the 5, the 10, the 15. Right across the 20. Into New Mexico territory. 15, 10, 5. Does he get in?
He did.
Touchdown,
He did.
Pirates.
Dante Wright goes back. He played like a center fielder at Yankee Stadium and then takes it the length of the building. The young man was electric on that kick return.
Do you not enjoy this?
No.
Would you rather not do it?
That's not in the cards.
Why not?
It's not an option. I've worked so hard for so long. I've built myself up to a position and I've dug myself into a hole.
But I feel like you've reached a point in your life where, correct me if I'm wrong, you could do other things.
What am I going to do? There's nothing like a fight night check. That's the beauty of fighting.
NFL teams tanking this season are making a huge mistake. Why, good sir?
Okay. This show has nefarious producers who fashion my idle comments over text into hot takes. And frankly, I'm fine with that, to be honest. Let's talk about Manning for a second. Someone who has not yet reached his potential by any measure. There will never be a player, in my opinion, that is a surefire lock that is worth burning an entire NFL season for.
Edwards has got it. Throw, tip, intercepted. Destin Mack, the INT. And he makes the biggest play of the game defensively for Orlando.
Great coverage on the back end by the Orlando Pirates. 4th down and 4. Destin Mack in coverage. Big time hit by Kyrie Coleman leads to the interception.
I said it once, I'll say it again. I didn't think Carnell Tate was one of the 4 best players in this draft, and I thought the Tennessee Titans taking Carnell Tate over Arvell Reese was a mistake, especially with a defensive-minded head coach. But hey, that's just my opinion. We handed out a bunch of A-pluses earlier on the show, the teams that we thought absolutely crushed it in the NFL draft. But you can't have positive without the negative. Let's look at the flip side, the teams that we think deserve F-minuses, a failing grade for the NFL draft. So, Coley, I will start with you. Which is the first team that made you raise a little bit of an eyebrow with what they did in the NFL draft?
You know, Caroline, I don't know if I'm really comfortable giving failing grades because I think this was still a for what the draft was for all of these teams, for what the draft board looked like. I think most teams actually did okay, you know. That being said, in order to participate in this experiment, I'm picking the New York Jets. I know I picked the Giants for the first half with the A+. I'm picking the Jets here because I as I've had more time to really sleep on this and think through the pick of David Bailey at number 2, I don't know why the Jets did that. I like David Bailey. I think he's a great edge rusher. I think he would have made sense a little bit further down in the first round, possibly all the way to number 5, where, of course, the Giants end up picking Arvell Reese. I thought that Arvell Reese, from a cultural fit, from everything Aaron Glenn seems to want, it felt more like Reese was going to fit there for the Jets at number 2. So the fact that the Jets ended up with David Bailey, I wasn't really a fan of that, especially the more that I really slept on it. The other decision that the Jets made that I felt like did not really rise to the level of a passing grade was the quarterback you see on your screen there, Cade Klubnik from Clemson. Klubnik, by all accounts, by all rights, had a great college career at Clemson, did well. I actually covered 1 or 2 of his games when he was there. But he doesn't scream potential day one starter. And again, I know that he was drafted in the 4th round, so that also doesn't scream day one starter, but definitely screams backup and a guy who you're going to hand the reins to in case your starter goes down. I didn't think that it was worth it for them to trade away 2 picks in the 4th round in order to jump up 18 places. They jumped 18 spots in order to get Klubnik before any other teams that needed quarterbacks possibly did that. Part of the problem with that, part of the reason why that even happened for the Jets is that they missed out on the 2 other quarterbacks that they possibly could have drafted a little bit earlier. Maybe those players went earlier than they expected. That, of course, being Carson Beck and Drew Aller, who went to Pittsburgh. Beck, of course, going to Arizona. Either way, jumping 18 spots in the 4th round and then losing not just a 4th, but also a 6th round pick. That didn't seem like that was a true, a really good trade haul in order to land somebody like that. So I just felt like those 2 decisions, made it a non-passing grade for me when it comes to the Jets.
I'm with you there. I mean, of course, style and fit and personality, all of those things matter. But when you saw Garrett Nussmeier slide all the way to the 7th, Taylon Green to the 6th, several of these, what we all view as project quarterbacks in the National Football League, trading draft capital to get another project in the 4th round, probably higher than a lot of people anticipated Cade Klubnik to go. It was a question mark for me. And I'm with you. F grade, maybe not necessarily fair, but at least some draft strategy that made me raise an eyebrow was the Dolphins. The Dolphins' number 1 need, or at least one of their top needs going into this draft, I viewed as wide receiver. And you move on from Jalen Waddle this past offseason, the Dolphins' wide receiver room is Malik Washington and Theo Weiss Jr., AJ Henning, Jalen Tolbert, a lot of guys that I kind of view as 3s at best, maybe fringe NFL starters. And the Dolphins didn't address receiver until their 4th pick in the draft. They took Caleb Douglas, the wide receiver out of Texas Tech, in the 3rd round. But Caleb Douglas had 6th round grades. So maybe the Dolphins valued him much more than maybe some other draft gurus out there. But in terms of value, not a great value with a position of need, especially when you pay Malik Willis all the money that they paid him. And especially when there's still a question mark of, is Malik Willis a starting quarterback in the National Football League? He has never been one before. So I thought the Dolphins' strategy should have been give Malik Willis more weapons and add to this offense a room, and a side of the football that was totally and completely barren this past offseason. So thought that was a pretty big reach for a position of need. I don't give the Dolphins an F on the entire draft. I thought the fact that they could get Chris Johnson with the 27th pick in the draft, a cornerback out of San Diego State. A lot of people viewed Chris Johnson as one of the best, if not the best, cornerback prospects in this draft. Love that pick for them, especially with Jeff Hafley, a defensive-minded head coach. Caden Proctor, one of the top tackle prospects in this draft, needs to make sure that he keeps his weight in check. He's a little bit of an inconsistent player, but he did fill a need for the Dolphins there. So not an F overall, but I thought an F in terms of giving Malik Willis pass-catching options.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair assumption, or fair assessment, I should say. And again, yeah, we're giving Fs, but these Fs are more for, like you said, the decision making here, the actual pick selection in some spaces. Overall, yeah, the Dolphins had a decent enough draft. The Jets had a decent enough draft as well. For my second non-passing grade is what I'm going to call it. I got to go all the way back to the 1st round, and I got to give it to one of the friends of the Steelers pick at number 21 overall, Max Ahanachour. I mean, we saw a sign of the moon that we did not need to see. Leave that to NASA showing us images of the moon. We did not need to see that. That was one of Max Ahanachour's friends at his draft party in Los Angeles. The word came down, the announcement was made that Max was drafted, and immediately one of his friends stood up and just a nice, calm, exuberant way, trying to just give his friends some love, and all we saw were these shiny black underwear. Thank goodness, he had on underwear. Also, thank goodness that the underwear wasn't any crazy color or any crazy pattern, but Max, come on, man. You got to come and get your mans, man. Come on now. That's a failing grade for me.
Oh no, no. Criminal. That is maybe lesson number one. Always know where the cameras are. Is he wearing latex undies? Are those latex or leather undies? That is the shiniest pair of breeches that I have ever seen in my entire life. The lighting is not doing this man any sort of favors because I mean, like that's not cotton. Cotton doesn't shine that way.
That is also
Polyester
like poor
does
awareness.
not shine that way.
No. Poor awareness. Like, you know, like awareness is one of those things that we grade draft prospects on, right? Max, your guy has no awareness. He's got to know where the cameras are. He's got to know that if he doesn't, he's going to become a meme, which unfortunately for him, he went viral and deserves an F in this case.
I mean, but get you a friend like Max Ahanachore's friend that he doesn't even care if his booty is broadcast for everyone to see on national television. He's just so happy for you that he has to jump up and give you a hug. He doesn't care where the cameras are, that his underwear is showing. He's just coming to support his friend. So put your friends before, I guess, your own meme moment on social media. Get you a friend like that.
That's a real
next
one right
grade for
there.
me. Oh, that is a real one. Next one for me, not necessarily an F, but more of an incomplete. And that goes to Diego Pavia because he became the first Heisman finalist to go undrafted in more than a decade. The last time that happened was in 2014. Now, he did accept an invitation to next week's mini camp with the Baltimore Ravens, so he'll get some FaceTime with the Ravens next year. He'll get the opportunity to work out with Baltimore next week, according to Adam Schefter there. But, Coley, when I look at this isn't necessarily a massive surprise to me. There is no doubt that Diego Pavia is a certified winner. He brought Vanderbilt football from the butt of every single joke in the Southeastern Conference to a legitimate contender. Like, Vanderbilt was a legitimate college football playoff contending team this past season. Now, they didn't make the CFP, but they had a very strong resume to do so. They went into Neyland Stadium and beat Tennessee. They beat LSU at home. He was able to beat Alabama 2 years ago. Diego Pavia is a winner. But I said 2 weeks ago, he's not an NFL quarterback. He's too small. You're looking at how much Kyler Murray has struggled in the NFL. Now, Bryce Young had a solid season this past year, but Bryce Young had a really difficult beginning of his career in the NFL. Short quarterbacks just don't have a great track record. And also, Diego Pavia has a bad attitude. Like, Diego Pavia did not win the Heisman Trophy, and he had a sign at his post-celebration saying, F the Heisman Trophy voters. He's a very big and very bold personality that I don't really necessarily blame NFL general managers for not wanting to take a swing on a project quarterback, a short quarterback, who also, let's be fair, kind of has an attitude problem.
You know what's wild is I feel like this is a situation where Johnny Manziel walked so that Diego Pavia could not get into the league. I mean, they're so
Fair.
similar in terms of the makeup in that regard. Johnny was a little bit taller than Diego, but still considered a quote unquote shorter quarterback, and also had his edge and attitude, whatever you want to call it, that moxie that made up who Manziel was. And I think that this is teams kind of having learned that lesson. This is also the Browns, who were a team, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, they made that gamble on Manziel. There's a completely different regime right now. They didn't go that route. I do feel as if Pavia will get these opportunities like he's gotten with the Ravens. When I look at him, being an undrafted guy, being a guy who maybe even could have been a seventh rounder. I think that was where some of the mocks would have put him potentially. It's primarily because of his size. Let's make that plain. Being 5'9", having to see over these tall lines where your lineman, the average height is 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". That is a difficulty. Russell Wilson somehow has been able to make a career out of being a quote unquote shorter quarterback and still making it work, but it's because he could get out of the pocket. He could do all those other things early in his career. Pavia can do some of that, but he's not Russell Wilson. That also being said, he's got this edge to him. You referenced the comments that he made after the Heisman. He kind of would take some other digs throughout the year that showed some of his competitiveness and the way that he didn't want to be overrun. Remember when they played Alabama and they beat Alabama, and he had the comment about, wanting to beat them because they didn't like him, they disrespected him or whatnot. Teams do pay attention to that kind of thing now. And they definitely pay attention to it when it's a guy who's contending to be the number 3 quarterback on a roster, as opposed to being the starter or even contending for that number 2 spot. So I think going to a rookie minicamp is going to be good, whether it works out or not for him. In Baltimore, someone else is going to give him a similar opportunity to try out, and we'll see what happens from there. But for right now, I'm with you. This is an incomplete because he didn't finish the mission that he said he was going to set out and do, and that was to be a Heisman Trophy winner, or at least a Heisman Trophy finalist, and then an NFL starter. It just isn't in the cards for him.
Just doesn't breed a whole lot of confidence in a player when his mentor very famously did not watch a single minute of film in the NFL when he was a first-round draft pick. But do we have confidence, though, in the New York Knicks? We'll get into that coming up next. CP, the Fanchise, joins the show. Series tied 2-2. What comes next? We'll get into that coming up next here on Yahoo Sports Daily.
Does Orlando win it in overtime, or does this instant classic continue? Deep drop and throw, end zone, Thomas Owens. That's an Orlando overtime winner. That is the most decorated receiver in the history of the franchise. Of course, he's the one to end it.
He's like 6'5", 230, like insane athlete, really, really good arm. And I don't know if he'll ever be the 4th best quarterback in the league where he's like Josh Allen, kind of like always in, MVP conversations, but he can be in the Matt Ryan, Dak Prescott tier where he's like kind of always quarterback 7-ish and like can have those years and moments where he's playing like an all-pro. Like that to me is the best outcome.
What put you over the top to like, I want to go to Indiana?
I was really close to going to a couple other schools. However, the point that really cemented me into Indiana is Coach Signetti really focusing on development. His big selling point was, hey, I don't know, like other schools are trying to sell you on if we're going to win a national championship, if we're going to win all these games. I just know one thing I can do is develop quarterbacks.
It's all about alignment and assignment, whether you're playing junior high football or IFL football. Myler fakes the give, goes the other way with it. He launches himself into the end zone, and he's going to get the touchdown.
That's just a dynamic effort. That is a will to want to get it in the end zone there, because he knew that he was running out of space.
Yes.
And so he thought, there's only one way you can go here, and that's up and over.
Wasn't leaving here without a dub. Squad did what was needed. Back to the Garden. The series tied 2-2. That from CP, the Fanchise, who joins us now. Knicks YouTube star, creator of Knicks Fan TV. So CP, we just saw the tweet there. You got to attend Game 4 in the flesh in Atlanta. New York seemed to kind of get their lick back. Time to get that winning mojo back. How are you feeling right now with this series headed back to MSG?
Feeling fantastic. And good morning to you guys, by the way. Thanks again for having me on. Always a pleasure to be on. But feeling fantastic. I was thoroughly disgusted with this team's effort in Game 3. I had to come down to Atlanta myself for Game 4 and see to it that these guys got a victory. We had a great weekend, great Knicks Fan TV takeover. 250 fans for the pregame show. We had Knicks legend John Starks with us for a live show, and then we got to see the squad win. But in terms of the Game 4 action, the Knicks did what they needed to do, which was take care of business. To me, they are the favorites in this series, as they should be if they play to their strengths. And in this series, guys, their strength is playing through Karl Anthony Towns. I was thoroughly impressed with the Big Bodega's first playoff career triple-double. The Knicks running the offense through Karl Anthony Towns in that high post. You saw some great chemistry between him and OG Anunoby on those backdoor cuts. finding cutters all night and really just dominating a smaller Atlanta Hawks front line. This is the way for the Knicks to win this series and take care of business, and I like the way that they handled it in Game 4.
CP, as I was watching that clip and watching the game too, I'm reminded of what Alan Hahn came in and told Jason Fitz and I a couple weeks ago. He basically said right before the playoffs that Cat is starting to feel more comfortable, and if they're going to do anything going forward, it's going to go through him. So that's a good notation by you. But I want to ask you a little bit about the crowd there in Atlanta. I'm from Atlanta. I've been to State Farm Arena. I know what it's like. I live here in New York. I go to the Garden. I know what MSG is like, how loud and raucous it can get. I've seen the scenes, of course, outside the Garden after the big wins. How did the environment inside State Farm, how did that match what you're used to in New York?
Felt like home. Felt like home, Coley, man. I mean, when I got to my seats, I was in section 120, and I kid you not, we were surrounded with orange and blue. It was orange and blue everywhere. And so it was an incredible atmosphere. Like you, I spent some time living in Atlanta, so I was used to that environment when the Knicks come into town, and they don't call it MSG South for no reason, man. Knicks fans show out because they are loyal to their team, one, and number two, the tickets are cheaper. Let's just keep it real. It's very hard to get into Madison Square Garden these days during the playoffs. So sometimes between the flight, you might have, a cousin or somebody you can bunk out with to stay, and then you get cheaper tickets to get to the game. So all in all, it was a good experience and a great weekend for the Knicks fans down in ATL.
All right, CP, I have to get your thoughts on this. A brand new, fresh report from Sam Amick, a senior NBA writer for The Athletic. He says, quote, Knicks head coach Mike Brown could be on the hot seat even if New York wins the East this year. The noise surrounding the Knicks' Mike Brown won't die down unless they reach the NBA Finals, and even that might not be good enough for the first-year New York coach. Wow. Reaction to that.
Yeah, I mean, look, not surprising. I mean, is it whether or not is it cap or is it facts? Look, Mike Brown is going to be under a lot of pressure. He came in knowing that this team finished 2 games short of the Eastern Conference Finals. The coaching search was kind of questionable in terms of, was there a plan? Was he their first choice? Didn't seem so. And so with all that being said, he's under a lot of pressure here to at least make it to the NBA Finals. James Dolan was quoted here on air at New York's WFAN saying that he expects this team to make it to the finals. All the investments that he's made over these years, all the big trades that Leon Rose has made over the years, and on top of the fact that they've now made the coaching change, this team is expected to get there. The East, guys, is wide open. You look at Detroit and the struggles that they're having with the Orlando Magic. Detroit has to prove that they are truly that number 1 seed that won the East this year. Boston, good team, great team. Former champions under Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, but nevertheless a team that I think the Knicks have a good shot at beating as well. So I don't think there's a significant roadblock here for the Knicks to get to the NBA Finals, but it's up to them to lock in up here and play to their strengths. But nevertheless, yeah, Mike Brown is under a lot of pressure here to get the job done.
Yeah, this is a town that's used to Steinbrenner. We'll see if Dolan kind of acts the same way as George did back in the day. A lot of social media was talking after this last game about Brunson's conversation with his dad. The cameras were rolling right there. What was your take on that? Much to do about nothing, or is there something to be concerned about?
Nothing. I saw a dad coaching his son, trying to get the best out of him. If that was me, that would be me and my son when he gets older. Like, I thought it was great. It's great to see. Rick is always tough on Jalen. He's his toughest critic, as he should be. And that's how it's been since Jalen was young. And that's how he got to the NBA. He can't get to the NBA without his dad being a sharp critic and a great coach. So, look, this was a game where Miles McBride was quoted as saying they are playing for their lives. And so every minute, every possession counted here. And this is what we saw on the court. These guys really raised their level of play. And Rick just wanted to make sure that his son was going along for the ride and leading by example, being a playmaker, making his teammates better. That is where Jalen Brunson is going to need to shine here in the playoffs. We all know he can get his offense. He scored 19 points in game 4, but as a playmaker and elevating his team, especially on the offensive side, because defensively it can get a little bit dicey with his physical limitations. So on the offensive side, it's not just the buckets, it's the floor general and playmaking on that side of the ball.
We talked about Cat at the start of this and how he's been balling throughout the last couple of games of this playoffs. But in order for him to become like an untouchable, legendary type of Knicks player, what does he got to do? And do you think that that's even possible?
Oh, it's definitely possible, but it's got to come in a bigger stage. To me, Coley, this Atlanta Hawks, this is appetizer for him. And that's no disrespect to the Hawks. They've had a great season, and they have good players, good scrappy team. But this is an appetizer for Karl-Anthony Towns, who's a career all-star, a career double-double threat, and a three-point assassin, as he calls himself, one of the best shooting big men in the game. So let's see that. So I like the way that the Knicks have been playing through him. But to get to that upper echelon of respect, he's got to do it in a bigger spot. So should they advance here and most likely play the Boston Celtics, dominate Neemias Queta, make your name in that stage. Should they get to the Eastern Conference Finals, do the same thing. Hey, last year he had a really great game in Game 3 against the Indiana Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals, really saving the Knicks season, at least temporarily there, scoring 17 points in that fourth quarter when the Knicks were down by a ton. It's those type of moments, those type of performances that Knicks fans remember forever. He's got to keep doing it in a big spot. But I was very encouraged with that triple-double in Game 4 against the Atlanta Hawks.
CP, I think it's fair to say that the best story of round one so far has been LeBron James. Even with an 8-turnover performance in Game 4, LeBron still looks like he's stepping back into a time machine, into peak prime LeBron. I think it's fair to say maybe the second best story of round one, not if you're a Knicks fan, but just in general, has been CJ McCollum. I mean, a guy who's a family guy, a nice guy, mild-mannered guy, looking like he is an MSG villain. I mean, have you ever seen something like this as somebody who's been around the league for a long time? Have you ever seen, a performance or maybe a change in reputation like we're seeing from CJ McCollum?
Especially when you think about the fact that at 34, he's on the other side of his prime. So to see him doing this at this stage, you have to respect it. Even though he is playing for the opposition, I've respected his output so far because to me, in some of these games, he's even outplayed Jalen Brunson at times. So I think it's been impressive to see the way that CJ is really leading this Hawks team in being the guy. When they handed the keys over to, really, it was supposed to be Jalen Johnson. It was CJ McCollum who came off the bench at first and now was entered into the starting lineup for Zachary Risese, and he has delivered, and he's been a thorn in the Knicks' side. This is why the Atlanta Hawks have 2 games in this series on the Knicks. And so, but I did like the way that the Knicks defended him in Game 4, putting him in more 2-on-the-ball situations, trying to disrupt his rhythm a little bit and getting the ball out of his hands, and then also forcing him into situations where he had to guard Jalen Brunson, because in those situations, you will tire out, especially on the defensive end. But nevertheless, to see CJ McCollum doing this at 34, it's been impressive. And he was a guy, when he was with the Wizards, I wish that the Knicks were able to get as, one of the finishing touches to a championship run, because the Knicks really need another playmaker, another ball handler at the guard spot. And had they been able to get a guy like a CJ, I think that would have been really great for them. But unfortunately, being a closer second apron team, they weren't able to get that done.
Bringing it back to the Knicks real quick, when you look at Game 5, which player, not named Jalen Brunson, not named Karl-Anthony Towns, which player do you want to see deliver just like an otherworldly, all-time performance in order for you to feel good about the rest of this series?
Man, you know what? So many guys have been stepping up, man. I got to give credit to the guy. I call him the dog. That's OG Anunoby. 20 points per game in this series, 50% shooting from 3. He's been lights out on both ends of the floor. I don't think we give enough credit for two-way play. And OG Anunoby continues to elevate his game. He's wanted more and more responsibility in this offense. And when he's gotten it, he's delivered. He was exceptional in that Game 4 win over the Hawks. I love the way Josh Hart is playing. He's been playing with grit, even though he hasn't been shooting the ball well. His defense on Jalen Johnson the entire series, his physicality on Jalen Johnson, and his veteran experience. Josh Hart has been playing like a dog. I also want to commend Jordan Clarkson, guys. Jordan Clarkson has reinvented his game since being put on the bench by Mike Brown midway through the first half of the season, and he has come back and really been gritty off the bench for the Knicks. But you guys ask, who's the player that I want to see step up to make me really feel good about this series? And it's no question, it's Mikal Bridges. He had a very rough Game 3, no points, 4 turnovers. It was a rough go for him. Game 4, he was a little bit more aggressive in getting into his offense, at least early. And Mikal Bridges has struggled in terms of finding his role in this offense where there's a lot of mouths to feed. Defensively, on Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I love the way that he's played. But, hey, you never know. Some nights Jalen Brunson might not have it shooting, or Karl-Anthony Towns or even OG might not have it shooting. So Mikal Bridges, he has to stay locked in, stay aggressive, and make sure that he's delivering for this team. He's under a lot of pressure based on the deal that the Knicks made to get him. Whether it's fair or unfair, look, I'll let others be the judge. But nevertheless, he is here, and he's got to deliver for this team.
Like, I know priority number one for you as a Knicks fan and for the Knicks organization is beat the Hawks in advance. But the winner of this series will face the winner of Boston Philly. So have you been keeping an eye on that series, and what has stood out to you about that series from the Knicks perspective?
Yeah, I think Joel Embiid came back and ruined it all for the Philadelphia 76ers. You know, look, Boston is strong. They're a strong team. I watched that game 3 against Philadelphia when, it looked like Paul George and Andre Drummond turned back the clock, but the Celtics had an answer for every shot. They went shot for shot with those guys, and I thought game 3 was really, really pivotal in this series where, I felt like the Celtics were ultimately going to pull away. So it looks like they should wrap it up in 5, but that's why, guys, I felt like the Knicks in this series against the Hawks really dropped the ball here in terms of games 2 and game 3, where they lost by 1 point, but still winnable games that they just did not execute down the stretch to take. Because if they are able to do that, they should have been able to wrap this Hawks team up in 5 or maybe even a sweep. And then you get the rest that you need to go into Boston, hostile territory against a team that is circling this date, circling this matchup, especially after last year's embarrassment. Jaylen Brown, he's had it out for Jalen Brunson and the Knicks. Jason Tatum wants that redemption from the Achilles tear, Peyton Pritchard as well. So I wanted the Knicks to be as healthy as possible to get into this Boston series. But hey, this is how the playoffs are. You got to execute and you got to close games.
CP, the Fanchise, he is everywhere. You can find him on SiriusXM NBA Radio, on WFAN. You can follow him on Instagram at CP, the Fanchise. CP, always appreciate your insight and your perspective on the Knicks side of things. Appreciate you as always, my friend. We'll catch up soon.
Anytime, guys. Have a great day, and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, you too. All right, coming up next, some things that just made us say, wow. Coming up next.
Another matchup between the Denver Nuggets and the Minnesota Timberwolves. How are these teams going to guard each other?
If you're Denver, you're going to have to find a comfort throwing different coverages at Minnesota and Anthony Edwards. It can't just be one thing. The same goes for Nikola Jokic, where honestly, whatever you do, I'm eventually going to get to a point where you do not feel comfortable with how you are guarding me, no matter who's on me.
Handoff, Thomas busting it through for the end zone, touchdown! Tavion Thomas and Tucson back in front with 16 seconds left. 1 second, final play of the game. Jerome Johnson look into the end zone. Johnson, far corner, jump ball, knocked into the crowd. Game over, Tucson wins.
Playing basketball with your back to the basket and not able to see the floor in the same way was a whole lot different for LeBron. And so that's why it took a little bit for him to feel comfortable in that back to the basket positioning. He's got more post-ups this postseason than Jokic, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Alperen Sengun combined. This is a huge story, and what a wrinkle that LeBron James has thrown into this series.
When you guys talk about your relationship and your friendship and your respect, there are some people who think like, well, do they want to kill each other? Do they want to fight each other? Do they want to hurt each other? You have to do that when you fight someone.
Yeah. If you have like females sparring in the gym, like it's really hard to not to go heavy. Like women just like, they cut that, emotional thing off and they just like, it's me or you. And Rhonda has that, I have that.
Wow.
Wow. Sometimes things make you say wow, and some things just command an Owen Wilson wow.
Wow.
So the name of the game is simple here, Coley. Our producers are going to pull up a sports story from the weekend. So if the sports story absolutely blew your socks off, if it's captivating us, we tell our producer Josh to play this sound.
Wow.
Wow. But if you're not shocked or impressed, it doesn't command an Owen Wilson wow, then tell us why that you are not going Owen. So let's start off with this. A report over the weekend that the Pelicans are considering Rajon Rondo in their search for their next head coach. So are you going Owen on this one or nah?
I'm going Owen. I want to hear that. Wow. Yeah, there we go. I'm really intrigued by this, Caroline, because whether it happens or not, the fact that he's in the conversation says something interesting. And I think I've even seen reports that he has actually interviewed already. Granted, Rajon Rondo has very limited coaching experience. He was kind of like a guest assistant coach. I think that was the official term that the Bucks used under Doc Rivers. Of course, he played for Doc when he was a Celtics so many years ago, a champion with those same Celtics teams. This is a guy who has been known as a really smart player. You know, he was known to have all kinds of basketball insights that when guys typically have that as players, people say, oh, they could get into coaching if they want to. I'm intrigued by this. I just want to see if it actually pans out. I don't know if it will quite get that close. What I'm probably most intrigued about with Rajon Rondo is the fact that he is apparently an excellent flag football player. He's 40 years old right now. So he's going to be 42 by the time the Olympics come. But apparently he is a really good quarterback and defensive back. He was a quarterback in high school in addition to playing basketball. So maybe we don't see him coach in 2 years. Maybe we see him on the sidelines for Team USA in flag football.
Watch your back, Tom Brady. We got a new flag football quarterback in his 40s that is coming for your job. I mean, what can't this man do? Play, coach, flag football? As much as I love the story, I'm going nah on this one. I'm not going Owen here. Pels fans love Rajon Rondo. He spent a short period of time in New Orleans, but I think that the fan base really respects him, really likes him, what he brought to the team as a player. But he just doesn't have experience. Everyone has told me how smart of a basketball mind he is, and I do not deny that in the slightest. But there is a difference between having a really high basketball IQ, kind of coming in as a supplementary piece on the coaching staff, and being the head coach of a franchise that is in the absolute depths of the NBA, that is so desperate for just any source of good. I mean, New Orleans Pelicans fans have nothing to be excited about, have nothing to be happy about. And although I love Rajon Rondo, the player and the person, I don't know about Rajon Rondo, the coach. So I'm going to go nah here just because there's a lack of experience that I think is necessary in order to be a head coach. But I want to see that. I'm going Owen on Rajon Rondo, the flag football quarterback.
Wow. That's what I want to see too. And kudos to our production team. I don't know if they knew that I was going to pull that trick out of the back of my head, and they are on it. We got Rajon Rondo as a flag football player right there. I mean, he had such handles as a guard there in basketball. So you got to imagine that he's got the handles here. What else you got for us, Caroline?
All right, well, you cannot spell playoffs without AYO. And on Saturday, Ayo Dosunmu had a career-high 43 points off the bench to give the injury-plagued Wolves a commanding, shocking 3-1 series lead over Denver. That is the second most points in NBA history off the bench in a playoff game. So you going Owen here?
Oh, I'm going Owen, Ayo. Wow. Yes, give me that wow. There we go. I'm going with it because, man, this is incredible. I mean, that's essentially history. That's number 2 in terms of scoring off the bench all time in a playoff game. That was a number 2 performance of all time in that sense. 43 points is mind-boggling. It's kind of mind-boggling to me that we're not talking about his 43 points, in a playoff game and matching it with 83 points in a regular season game even if it is coming against a team like the Wizards. I mean, this is one of the most incredible single game performances we've seen in the NBA this year. And Io really deserves this. He got a little bit of a raw deal in Chicago, the way that he was treated by the Bulls, his hometown team, played at Illinois in college. And, and how here he has a chance to not just ball out here in the playoffs, but to send this team possibly into the next round and maybe even beyond. We know that the T-Wolves are missing, of course, star Anthony Edwards with that knee injury. It could be some extended amount of time that he'll be out. And then also Dante DiVincenzo is now out for the rest of the season with that Achilles tear. So this is a moment for Ayo Dosunmu to really step up and maybe build off this 43-point effort. I am all the way going Owen, wowing on this. That was an incredible performance by him.
I am not just going Owen, and I'm not just going double Owen. This is a triple Owen, triple wow for me.
Wow.
There it is. 3 wows from me. It's not just the stat line, albeit, I mean, second most points off the bench for anyone in NBA postseason history. That itself speaks for itself. But we always say it, I always say it here on this show, Coley. It's not just what you do, but doing it in the postseason. Legends make themselves known in the postseason, in the playoffs, in the biggest moments. So Ayo doing it in the playoffs, doing it in what I think is the most intriguing matchup in round one. 2 certified superstars, 2 teams that feel like they have championship expectations. And for Minnesota to do it as kind of feeling like the underdog, going up 3-1 against the big bad Denver Nuggets and Nikola Jokic, it is just everything about this is just so cool. It's so fun to see it in a guy who might not necessarily be a household name, but he is solidifying himself as a household name and as a potential superstar here in this NBA playoff. So triple Owen here, but let's wrap it up with this one. Move it over to the diamond. Max Scherzer got absolutely shelled over the weekend. 2 1/3 innings pitched. He had 0 strikeouts, have him stuck at a 3.499 ERA on his career. Once he gets that 1 strikeout, he will enter the top 10 in strikeouts of all time. Now, after that bad performance, Toronto is considering pulling him from the rotation. He has a nearly 10 ERA in just 5 starts. Are we going Owen for almost history, or should Toronto cut bait?
Josh, I need to hear that wow. I'm going on this because this is historic. I mean, 3,500 strikeouts is a big deal. 3,000 strikeouts is a big deal, but 3,500 to have it happen in a Blue Jays uniform, after a great postseason last year that he had, and then also to be in the top 10 conversation of all time. I say Blue Jays, hang in there with him for at least one more start. Give him one more start, and if he blows it up again, doesn't get that strikeout, maybe then it's time to cut him, to move on and figure something else out, because clearly, as it pertains to this season, it's not working. But again, it's April 27th. I say give him that shot. Go on. It's early in the year. You're not really going to lose anything in the standings right now. Give him a shot to get that strikeout and make some history.
I will always be the first person to say that above all warm fuzzies, your number one priority as an organization, as a manager, as a coach, is to win games. And if Max Scherzer isn't helping you do that, then you have to make baseball decisions. But Max Scherzer has played a lot and seen a lot and won a lot of baseball games, and he's done a lot for this Toronto Blue Jays franchise. It's 1 strikeout. Let the man get his history. And like you said, it's April 27th. All right, we can afford to do right by our player and allow him to solidify himself in the history books. I'm going Owen there. And we are going back tomorrow morning right here on Yahoo Sports Daily. Coley Harvey, I'm Caroline Fenton. We'll see you tomorrow.